All right, so you're prepping for that forest ranger interview and want to really impress. We've got some great stuff from RoleCatcher, their career guide, their interview guide, and their question repository all about forest rangers. It's like having a secret weapon for your interview.
Yeah, we're going deep on this one, really dissecting those tricky interview questions to help you craft answers that showcase your passion and your expertise.
So before we get into the hot seat, let's set the stage. What does a forest ranger actually do? It's got to be more than just, you know, hiking through the woods and enjoying the view.
You're telling me. RoleCatcher paints this picture of the role, being both diverse and demanding. One day you might be, monitoring forest health, assessing the impact of pests or disease, and then the next day you could be educating visitors about fire safety, or even coordinating a search and rescue operation.
Wow, a really dynamic work environment. It's physically demanding, often isolated, but man, it sounds incredibly rewarding,
Yeah.
especially if you have a deep passion for nature and conservation.
And that passion is what you want to showcase right from the get-go. So let's jump into that first question from RoleCatcher's repository. What inspired you to become a forest ranger?
Seems like a pretty standard opener, but I bet there's more to it than meets the eye. What are interviewers really trying to figure out with this question?
They want to see genuine enthusiasm. A generic answer like, I love nature, just won't cut it. Think about a specific experience, a specific moment that really ignited your passion. Was it a childhood memory, exploring the woods? Maybe a volunteer project that opened your eyes to conservation efforts? Or maybe even a book that sparked your interest in ecology?
So it's all about telling a story that shows your connection to the field is authentic and deep-rooted.
Exactly. Share an anecdote. That reveals why this isn't just a job for you. It's a calling.
That makes total sense.
All
Like,
right.
what if a follow-up question comes up? Like, what challenges do you anticipate facing as a forest ranger, and how do you plan to overcome them?
That's a great question, and it's a fantastic opportunity to show that you've really thought critically about this career path. Don't be afraid to talk about the tough stuff. RoleCatcher's career guide highlights some potential challenges like working in those remote areas, dealing with unpredictable weather, or even facing conflicts with visitors who may not understand the rules.
So how do you address those challenges
Huh.
in a way that shows you're prepared but also optimistic?
Focus on your problem-solving skills and your resilience. You could say something like, I know working in isolated areas can be challenging, but I'm actually quite comfortable with solitude, and I'm proactive about staying connected with my team. I'm also eager to learn from more experienced rangers about how to navigate difficult situations with visitors while still ensuring their safety and protecting the forest.
That's a really good approach. It shows you're realistic but also adaptable and eager to learn. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What experience do you have working with wildlife and plants?
This is your chance to really showcase your practical skills and your knowledge. Have you conducted any wildlife surveys, identified plant species, or participated in habitat restoration projects?
What if someone is early in their career and doesn't have a ton of formal experience?
Even then, they can highlight relevant coursework, volunteer work, or even personal projects. Maybe you helped with trail maintenance at a local park, or volunteered at a wildlife rehabilitation center. Remember, every forest ranger starts somewhere.
It's all about framing those experiences in a way that demonstrates your passion and willingness to learn. So what about those tricky follow-up questions? What if they ask, can you tell me about a time you had to identify a specific plant or animal in the field?
You got to be ready to share a specific anecdote. Talk about the situation, how you use your knowledge to identify the species, and what you learned from that experience. It could be as simple as correctly identifying a poisonous plant while hiking and explaining why that knowledge is so crucial for a forest ranger.
So details and a touch of storytelling go a long way. Ready for question number 3? This one sounds intense. What strategies would you use to prevent wildfires in a forested area?
This one's all about showcasing your understanding of those fire management principles. Go beyond just listing techniques like creating fire breaks or conducting controlled burns. Explain why these methods are actually effective.
Right, like how fire breaks disrupt the continuity of fuel.
Yeah.
Or how controlled burns reduce the amount of flammable material in the forest.
Exactly. And don't forget the critical role of public education. Talk about how you would engage visitors, explain those fire safety rules, and emphasize the importance of personal responsibility in preventing wildfires.
So it sounds like this question is really testing your ability to think holistically about fire prevention. Now, what if they follow up with, how would you approach educating visitors about fire safety during a period of high fire risk?
That's where you can really demonstrate your communication skills. You could say something like, I would increase the frequency of patrols, actively engage visitors at trailheads and campsites, and use clear and concise signage to emphasize fire restrictions.
It's about being proactive and adaptable,
Yeah,
and maybe even a little creative in how you get that message across.
exactly. You could even mention using social media or partnering with local organizations to spread awareness. Now let's shift gears a bit with question 4. How do you stay up to date with new research and developments in forest management?
So they're looking for someone who is committed to lifelong learning.
Absolutely.
Um,
Mention specific journals you read, like the Journal of Forestry, conferences you've attended, or even online forums where you engage with other professionals.
This is where RoleCatcher's AI can be really useful. It analyzes those job descriptions
Yeah.
and identifies the key words that employers are really looking for, so you can tailor your answers
Yeah.
to highlight the most relevant learning resources.
That's a great point, and don't be afraid to mention specific areas of interest within forest management, like wildfire ecology, invasive species management, or sustainable forestry practices.
It's about showing that you're not just keeping up. You're actively seeking out that knowledge and applying it to your work. What if they follow up with, can you give me an example of a recent research finding that has changed your approach to forest management?
Be prepared to discuss a specific study or development and explain how it's influenced your thinking. For example, you could talk about the increasing role of climate change in wildfire behavior and how that's led you to prioritize fuel reduction strategies in your area.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about knowing the information, but being able to analyze it and apply it to those real-world situations is really helpful. We need to tackle question 5.
Absolutely. This one gets into the interpersonal side of the role. How do you handle conflicts with members of the public who may not understand the rules and regulations of the forest?
Okay, this is all about diplomacy and communication, especially when people might be frustrated or even angry.
Exactly. You want to showcase your ability to de-escalate those situations, educate visitors, and enforce rules, while still maintaining a respectful and professional demeanor.
A hypothetical scenario could be really helpful here, right?
Absolutely. You could say something like, imagine encountering a group of visitors, having a bonfire in a restricted area. Instead of immediately issuing a citation, I would first approach them, calmly introduce myself, and explain the fire regulations and the reasons behind them.
And maybe highlight the importance of protecting the forest
Yeah.
from potential wildfires, especially if conditions are dry.
Exactly. And then you can explain that you understand they might be disappointed, but you're there to ensure everyone's safety and the preservation of the forest, offer alternative locations for their bonfire, or maybe suggest other activities they can enjoy.
It's about turning a potentially negative encounter into a positive learning experience. Now, what about those tricky follow-up questions? What if they ask, have you ever had to deal with a truly irate visitor, and how did you handle that situation?
That's where you can share a real-life experience, focusing on how you remain calm, how you listened to their concerns, and ultimately found a resolution that ensured everyone's safety and respected the rules. And remember, it's okay to acknowledge that those situations can be challenging, but highlight your ability to handle them with professionalism and empathy.
That's really helpful. It's about showing that you're not just a rule enforcer, you're also an educator and a problem solver.
Striking that balance, right? Okay, let's move on to a question that really tests your ability to think on your feet. Can you describe a time when you had to respond to an emergency situation in the forest?
Oh, here we go, those adrenaline-pumping scenarios. What kind of situations are they looking for?
They want to see how you handle pressure, how you assess risks and make quick decisions in those unpredictable environments. Think about a time you had to react to a wildfire, maybe a lost hiker, an injured animal, or even a sudden weather event.
So it's not just about the situation itself. It's about how you responded, what steps you took, and how you prioritize safety.
You got to walk them through that thought process. How did you assess the situation? What actions did you take? Did you need to call for backup? Did you have to administer first aid?
It's like you're painting a picture of your composure and your problem-solving skills in that high-stakes environment. Now, what if they follow up with, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in that situation?
That's a great opportunity to show that you're reflective and always learning. Maybe you realized you could have communicated better with your team, or maybe you discovered a new technique for handling a similar situation in the future. It's all about showing that you're constantly evaluating your performance and always looking for ways to improve.
It demonstrates that growth mindset, which is so valuable in any role, especially one as dynamic as a forest ranger. Okay, let's move on to a question that focuses on your core skills. What skills do you possess that would make you an effective forest ranger?
It's your time to shine. Think about the skills that really set you apart, whether it's your knowledge of those local ecosystems, your physical fitness, your ability to navigate with a map and compass, or your communication and leadership skills.
And don't forget about those soft skills. Teamwork, problem-solving, adaptability. Those are super important for working in those challenging and often unpredictable environments.
You're right. And remember, it's not just about listing those skills, it's about connecting them to those specific responsibilities of a forest ranger. For example, you could say, my strong observational skills are crucial for monitoring forest health and identifying potential hazards, while my knowledge of local flora and fauna allows me to educate visitors and contribute to conservation efforts.
That's a great way to tie those skills back to the role. Now, what about those follow-up questions? What if they say, can you give me a specific example of how you've used your insert skills in a challenging situation?
You want to be ready with a good anecdote that really showcases your abilities. It could be a time you used your map and compass skills to navigate through some dense fog. Or maybe a situation where your communication skills helped de-escalate a conflict between visitors.
Bringing those skills to life with real-world examples.
Okay.
Ready for question 8? This one seems like a classic dilemma. How do you balance the needs of the forest with the needs of the public?
This question gets to the core of conservation ethics and decision-making. They want to see that you understand the complexities of managing those public lands and that you can find sustainable solutions that benefit both the environment and the people who enjoy it.
Finding that balance between preservation and recreation.
Exactly. Think about a time you had to make a tough decision. Maybe closing a trail to protect a sensitive habitat, or restricting access to a certain area during fire season.
And be ready to explain the rationale behind that decision, highlighting your ability to consider multiple perspectives and make those well-informed choices.
You got it, you could say. I believe in engaging the public in those conservation efforts and finding creative solutions that allow people to enjoy the forest while minimizing their impact. For example, when increased foot traffic was damaging a sensitive wildflower meadow, I worked with park management to create an alternative trail that still offered those amazing views while protecting that delicate ecosystem.
Finding that win-win solution. What if they follow up with, have you ever faced a situation where you had to make an unpopular decision to protect the forest? How did you handle that?
This is where you can show off your communication and leadership skills. Talk about how you communicated those reasons behind the decision, how you addressed concerns and sought input from stakeholders. Really emphasize your commitment to transparency and finding those solutions that benefit the long-term health of the forest.
Building that trust and understanding, even when those decisions aren't met with, immediate enthusiasm.
Absolutely. Okay, let's tackle question 9. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing forest management today?
This one really requires you to think big picture and demonstrate your knowledge of those current issues affecting our forests.
You got it. You could talk about climate change and invasive species, deforestation, or even the pressure on forest resources due to population growth and recreation. Choose a challenge that resonates with you and explain why it's so important. And even better if you can suggest some solutions or strategies for addressing it.
So it's not just about being aware of the problems, but also thinking about how to solve them.
Exactly. For example, you could say, I believe the increasing threat of invasive species poses a major challenge to forest ecosystems. I would prioritize early detection and rapid response strategies, along with public education campaigns, to prevent the introduction and spread of these harmful species.
And maybe even mention how you would collaborate with researchers or partner with community organizations to really tackle this issue.
Collaboration is key in those complex challenges, like invasive species. What if they follow up with, how would you prioritize funding for different forest management initiatives, given those limited resources?
Well, that's a tough one. Really forces you to weigh those competing priorities and make strategic decisions.
It does. You'll need to show that you understand those budget constraints and your ability to make those informed choices based on the most pressing needs of the forest and the community. You could say something like, I would prioritize funding for initiatives that address the most immediate threats to forest health, things like wildfire prevention and invasive species control. I would also allocate resources to support long-term sustainability, like research and monitoring programs, public education, and those community engagement initiatives.
That's a really well-rounded approach, considering both the immediate needs and that long-term sustainability. Okay, we're down to the last question. How do you prioritize tasks and manage your time effectively in a fast-paced environment?
This one's all about showing off your organizational skills and your ability to juggle multiple responsibilities under pressure. Describe a time when you had to prioritize those tasks, meet deadlines, and stay organized in a really demanding environment.
And maybe mention specific tools or techniques you use to manage that workload. RoleCatcher's AI can actually help you identify those keywords related to time management and organization. They're really important for forest ranger roles.
Absolutely. You could say, I use task management apps to keep track of my responsibilities and deadlines. I also prioritize tasks based on urgency and importance, making sure those critical tasks are done first while still making time for those long-term projects.
It shows that you're proactive
Yeah.
and have a system for staying on top of things. What if they follow up with, can you give me an example of a time when you had to reprioritize your tasks
Yeah.
due to an unexpected event? How did you handle that?
This is your chance to show off your flexibility and adaptability. Talk about a situation where your plans had to change suddenly, maybe because of a wildfire, a search and rescue operation, or a sudden influx of visitors. Explain how you assessed the situation, how you adjusted those priorities, and how you communicated effectively with your team to make sure there was a smooth response.
It's all about showing you can stay calm and efficient,
Mm,
even under pressure, which is super important for a forest ranger.
you got it. And remember, throughout all of these questions, RoleCatcher's AI tools can provide some really valuable feedback.
Well, that's right. It analyzes your answers, identifies areas for improvement, and even suggests specific phrases you could use to really highlight your skills and experience.
It's like having a personal interview coach right in your pocket, helping you craft those perfect responses.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here, but before we wrap up, I have one more question for you. What about those unique experiences or skills that might not be explicitly listed in the guide? How do I make those shine?
Great question. Let's dig into that. Let's unearth those hidden gems, those skills or experiences that might not scream forest ranger, but that could actually make you stand out as a candidate.
So those things that make you uniquely qualified for this specific position.
Exactly.
All right, so let's say you're passionate about photography. Could that even be relevant to a forest ranger role?
Absolutely. You could use those photography skills to document forest health, capture those changes in ecosystems over time, or even create some really compelling visuals for educational materials.
Okay, I see that. What about something like rock climbing? Seems a little out there.
Not at all. Those rock climbing skills could come in handy during search and rescue operations in steep or challenging terrain.
Okay, so seemingly unrelated skills can actually be huge assets. What about language skills?
Imagine you're fluent in Spanish. That could be invaluable for communicating with a diverse group of visitors, making the forest more accessible to everyone.
It's all about thinking outside the box and highlighting how your unique passions and skills can contribute to the Forest Service's mission.
And don't be afraid to let your personality shine through. If you have a hobby that showcases your love for the outdoors, weave it into your answers. It could be as simple as, foraging for wild mushrooms or identifying birds by their songs.
Those little details that make you memorable and show your genuine passion.
And remember, RoleCatcher's AI can help you tailor those unique experiences to that specific job description. It can even suggest ways to connect your skills to the employer's needs, making your answers even more impactful.
So it's not just about having those unique skills, it's about knowing how to present them in a way that really resonates with that hiring manager.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that landing the job is just the beginning.
It's like you're stepping onto a new trailhead. The real journey begins when you put on that uniform and immerse yourself in the world of being a forest ranger.
And that's where your passion, your dedication, and continuous learning will really make a difference.
Embrace the challenges, never stop exploring, and always remember why you chose this path.
That's beautiful. And remember, even if this interview doesn't lead to your dream job right away, the insights and skills you've gained will be valuable for your future.
Keep learning, keep growing, and never give up on your passion for protecting our forests.
That's it for our deep dive into the world of forest ranger interviews. We hope you feel empowered to ace that interview and embark on this incredible journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.